Honorable House Chairperson, I wasn't aware that the Honorable Member is done. Congratulations. Maybe let me start with wishing everyone a happy Valentine's Day. President, Deputy President, and John. Can I call you John? Is it fine for the speech? No? Okay. Over the weekend, I spent time with a group of about 100 young leaders from universities, community and TVET colleges at Robben Island for the inaugural Mandela Sobukwe Leadership Retreat. The focus for this retreat was to illustrate the significance of our history, our constitution, leadership, entrepreneurial and innovation skills. For many of these young people, it was their first time on the island. It was a learning experience for all of us as we explored the challenges raised by you, Mr. President, during your State of the Nation address. These young leaders were asked to have a conversation with an ideal duo, Mandela and Sobukwe, about the State of the Nation address and about what their most treasured dreams are. One of the groups responded by declaring, and I quote, "We still staying, I hope, to find peace with ourselves, to use our teachings to better the future, to create jobs and wealth for all, to be able to stand on our own, to live in a world free of hate, to be known past our borders for greater things," close quote. These are not young people who are oblivious to the challenges that we face as a nation. They are alive to the challenges of unemployment, electricity crisis, water and infrastructure deficiencies, corruption, and the scarce and roaming ghosts we inherited from our past. However, they want to see this parliament seize with discussing solutions and these problems as opposed to squandering every opportunity presented for us to exchange counsel. These young people across the gender, racial and political spectrum left the island on Sunday with the resolve that their vision is to work for a South Africa of their dreams. Your State of the Nation address, President, as it should be, carried both criticism but praise. Without doubt, it inspired hope that the foundation of a future South Africa can only be built by the dreams of Madiba and Sobukwe and the dreams of those whom the torch was handed over to. Listening to the debate this year of the State of the Nation address, one wished that some of the leaders here today would have exchanged counsel with the young people who found themselves in the island, particularly the leader of the opposition and also the leader of the EFF. Every year, for the past 5 years or so, John, Honorable Steenhuisen here, convinced a few dignitaries and pals to rabble about the DA's so-called true state of the nation. And as usual, John, Honorable Steenhuisen here, did not disappoint. "We are ready to govern," he said, "only if the people can stop believing in the ANC. When the DA governs," he said, "we govern better." And this is the most fascinating one, as noted by Honorable Gungubele and Honorable Premier of KZN. The DA propaganda machinery has convinced itself and Twitter followers of the account of Helen Zille that wherever they govern better. The big lie, and they keep on keeping this lie, even at the risk of looking ridiculous. On the day of the true State of the Nation address, and this morning, John, Honorable Steenhuisen here, bragged about the municipalities that they govern at, starting with their golden goose, which is Cape Town, and he left short, he fell short of mentioning their boogeyman, the city of Tshwane. This is because on that day, pressure was mounting from the DA coalition partners to boot out the 4th mayor of the DA in that city in just 6 years. Solim Singman was the first, with a scandal of 12 billion allegedly awarded to Glad Africa without following due process. The second was Stephen Mkhalapa, who was caught munching the scone of a colleague in the office. Nagamorogo. The third one was Abel Tau, who resigned because the DA was not black like him, and found a home in Herman Mashaba's Action SA. Then there is this last one, Randall Williams. Adverse findings by the Auditor General of South Africa, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. Sewers have not been maintained properly in the last few years in Tshwane. Waste has not been collected in some areas for the last few weeks. A looming scandal for a 40 billion unsolicited bid for renewable energy is about to come out. Withdrawal by the fleet management company from the city because they failed to pay that fleet management company. But even worse, you think it gets worse. In November last year, the city itself failed to pay the salaries of the workers in the city of Tshwane. But Tshwane is not the only pinnacle of the DA's failure. In Modimolle Mokgopong, where I come from, the DA has effectively run the municipality down by enabling the looting of public resources and glaring state capture by a group of businesses allegedly linked to the DA mayor. Yes, the city of eThekwini has fixed some of the beaches that were not operational over the festive season, and more beaches will be opened in a few weeks in that particular city. But here in Cape Town, the beaches remain the preserve of white patrons through systemic exclusion and racial profiling. Where the DA governs, the Group Areas Act of Governing has effectively been restored, with the DA mostly servicing their constituencies, much to the neglect of black communities. I challenge the Mayor of Cape Town to make public how much business goes to black-owned companies compared to white companies in this particular city. This morning, I heard echoes of P.W. Botha in 1985 when John here, Honorable Steenhuisen, spoke of crossing the Rubicon. And yes, the DA should cross the Rubicon because the DA is no home for black and leaders who are women precisely because they are non-compliant. Ask Lindiwe Mazibuko, ask Mbalin Tuli, ask Pumzile Van Dam, who joined the DA with the hope that they have crossed the Rubicon. And yet, they were the ones who were crossed by the DA. I also noticed, John, the Honorable Steenhuisen, that you didn't mention Ekurhuleni in your praise of the cities where the DA govern. Precisely because under the DA, things have gotten so worse that it would even be ridiculous to blame the ANC. The DA is nothing but a pretender to the throne, even on our worst day. And yes, we've had those kind of days where we're at our worst, but we are correcting those particular days. But even in those worst days, you will never even be considered as our alternative, especially under you, John, the Honorable Steenhuisen. You represent the past that has packaged itself into a new repentant. That is why on the day of the State of the Nation, you wanted to even wet yourself, trying to appease both traditional constituency of the DA by behaving civil, prompt and proper, and yet wanted to steal the attention that the EFF was getting through sympathies by wanting to appeal to the speaker to be considerate. This wobble of yours, this jelly politics, this ideological flexibility, this spineless stances on the same issues, this opportunism is exactly why Tony Leon and Helen Zille are leading the DA through the window. You've called for politicians who are upright, ethical, and morally uncompromised. And maybe you have ticked all these boxes, but that can only take you this far and no further. We need leaders who know that marching to the head office of another political party instead of marching to ESCOM is nothing but provocation. But it is also demonstrate the signs of someone panicking, because in case you didn't know, the DA has an elective conference, and some DA leaders wannabe are raising their little paws and wanting to contest John, the Honorable Steenhuisen. I hope to see you back here, John, Honorable Steenhuisen, after your elective conference, and probably sitting there at the back where you deserve to be, because, you know, the DA also need howlers in this house. On a more serious note, This year, the NSFAS has confirmed funding for close to 1.2 million students. And yes, there have been delays, and some parents were anxious, but our Minister Nzimande, has been working around the clock to ensure that registration goes smoothly in all of these campuses. All students who have received messages from the NSFAS that confirms that they are provisionally funded should go to their institutions to register. Those who are waiting for appeals should wait a little bit longer, and we have appealed to institutions to actually be considerate. This year, Honorable Malema, enrollments at universities have reached close to 1.2 million students. And of course, yes, I agree with you, we need to be expanding the higher education sector. But we've done quite a lot, from a measly 400,000 in 1994, and very few of those were black and women, to now 1.2 million in universities. I think you must agree that the doors of learning and teaching are bursting open. The NSFAS is celebrating its 30th anniversary. From a little kit of a few millions soon, students' funding will be reaching close to 50 billion, with 90% of TVET students being funded. And in response present to the COVID-19 crisis, you have, of course, set up the economic recovery plan, and through this plan, infrastructure has been built. We've built a new paradigm for energy, implementing an employment stimulus to create jobs and support livelihoods, providing renewed support to growth businesses, and fast-tracking reform measures for a competitive and also inclusive economy. We believe that with specific interventions to save jobs and to create more, our economy is actually grinding further. This means more boots on the ground and also food on the table. Earlier this month, we lost Nontokozo Xaba, a student at Tshwane University of Technology, allegedly at the hands of his ex-boyfriend, Ncebo Chusi. Gender-based violence is a serious scourge in our society, and in our institutions of learning, through policy and institutional reforms, we're tirelessly working to deal with this scourge. We need young men to unlearn some of the practices, traditional, religious, and cultural, which reinforces toxic masculinity and makes them believe that they are entitled to the women vagina. Because that's what the problem is, the entitlement of young men in our campuses, but also in our community. We're doing this in honor of Uina Mkhetjwana of UCT, Nosicelo Mtebeleni of Fort Hare, Zolile Kumal of MUT, Precious Ramabulana of Capricorn TVET College, Takalani Mbulungeni of Univen, Asitandile Zozo of vets who lost their lives on our campuses. Over the course of the weekend, the EFF-CIC was addressing one of the important gatherings here in the Western Cape. And before then, I hear Honorable Cele that apparently there's a plot to kill Honorable Shivambo. I mean, you've listened to him speaking here. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. In this important gathering, the EFF-CIC started attacking the Xhosa culture of male initiation, disguising this attack as an attack on our Secretary General, Honorable Fikile Mbalula. He went further to mention our SG's qualifications, that he doesn't have posterior knowledge. You know, in the EFF, posterior knowledge is very important. As long as you can say, hail to our leader, you have posterior knowledge. Oh, superior knowledge, sorry. One of our universities have granted Mr. Malema a master's degree, which is a thing that we should celebrate. But having a master's degree should heighten our reasoning abilities and not resort to intimidate our opponents. It should teach us that to argue, it should teach us that we should argue with our brains and not our fists. That we should read more and engage and not intimidate or be personal. What Honorable Malema did here today, in response of the State of the Nation address, was to say pala pala and then read out a poster of the EFF about the march that they're having in some time in the future. That's all. Probably that's a good master's degree that he has. But we must say that bullies and stormtroopers of the opposition have only mastered one thing: debate should never be given a chance. A master's degree should teach us that in order to lead, we should listen to those whom we disagree instead of raising frivolous points of order. For the record, Honorable Mbalula was not elected because of when he went to the mountain or in all of those things. And by the way, I was here with you, Julius. Some of the facts, you are twisting them a bit, but let's leave it for another day. But if it's the criteria in the EFF as to when did someone go to the mountain or not, we wonder how did some people make it into the EFF leadership. Mehmet Buran Indian quipped that, and I quote, "A silver-tongued charlatan and a half-wit society are made for each other. When these two come together in an election, a great disaster happens. Charlatan comes to power." It would take beyond a century for a charlatan to come to power, Mr. Malema. More than a century. Mr. President, that throne that you occupy, never a charlatan, never a loudmouth, never a blabber or a gossip, never a turncoat, never a paper tiger should ever consider sitting there, red or blue. Malema or Steenhuisen, the honorables. Since ours is not a half-wit society, they will demonstrate at the polls next year that only the ANC lives, only the ANC leads, and only the ANC will live longer than all of them. And for the rest of the joke, I don't know if you know nursery rhymes. An old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had some cows, E-I-E-I-O. One of them was blue and one of them was red, E-I-E-I-O. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much.